Welcome everyone to this presentation, macroinvertebrates.org, a virtual tool for learning and teaching macroinvertebrate identification. This is the second presentation of two on this topic, with the first presented by Marty Lowe on the history and background of the project. Well, my name is Tara Mentz. I'm an aquatic ecologist and currently Stroud Water Research Center's Assistant Director of Education and Administrator for the International Macroinvertebrate Monitoring Program called the Leaf Pack Network. And in this next presentation, we'll dive deeper into those resources, materials, tools, and training techniques that myself and the project's co-design partners have created as a result of our research discoveries and piloted trainings with these new tools. So we'll take a tour of the resources available and where they can be used in a training environment to help learners learn to see and see to learn. And plus, we'll share a few ideas of how teachers can bring in the site with students. So speaking of research, in 2016, this project led a national survey of trainers in macroinvertebrate ID. We asked trainers about such things as their organization's goals, how did they use volunteer macroinvertebrate data, what are the resources and materials used in a training, and overall, what does the training environment look like, and those best practices that trainers incorporate. We had a large response and published those responses in a tech report that can be found on the website, and we'll also be publishing a manuscript on those findings this year. So briefly, what were some of those findings? As for the desired level of ID, most asked their trainees and volunteers to ID to the level of order with some families. And then when asked, would you like to train volunteers at a deeper level taxonomically and have them ID at that level? And this is where we got a mixed response, with half stating they were comfortable with where they're at, and the other half wishing to go at least to family, if not deeper to genus. And so with these results, you'll see this site is very helpful to family level, and on the site, all insect specimens are identified at least to the genus level. One last sharing from the survey, and this relates to the materials and resources used during our training. And as you may have guessed, there are many different tools that are brought into that experience. And here's a summary list of over 20 items, with those at the top being most used often and those at the bottom hardly at all. And what was interesting to us are those tools highlighted in yellow, not often used, relate to some kind of technology, whether it's scopes, cameras, videos, websites, or mobile applications. And as Marty mentioned in the other presentation, there are a lot of benefits to using this site, such as the high quality imagery that brings a specimen in such close view, you feel like you're looking through a scope without having to. And there are videos and interactive keys, there are voice recordings and other ways to engage besides just clicking on the pages. And the site offers many ways to see and to learn, again, for a more universal, holistic approach to learning. There is much support for ID, such as tips and pointers and guides. And then the site really has a strength, as I mentioned, to go to family level of ID if interested. And one question I know may be a concern is, can I use this site without having an internet connection? And the answer is yes. So that is a huge benefit. And now we'll show you exactly how to do that, using it offline by taking a look at the resources available and where to bring these into the training and learning environment. But also if you're doing a community event like an exhibit table or student program, many of these tools can be used for those scenarios. To note, there is a designated resources section of the website, which you can find here on the left side of the screen through the navigation bar. And there are currently 12 different resources to tap into, ranging from customizable presentation decks, printable materials, image galleries, rack cards, and more. And now I'll go into some of these a bit deeper. I'd first like to point out that there is a 4-page trainer guide available with tips and more in-depth information on using the site for trainings, but also considerations for your training environment and what a learner needs in order to have a favorable learning experience. And these are to help alleviate what was referred to as those bottlenecks to learning, which can be anything from stumbling on the lexicon, especially with morphology, to navigating a website, to getting enough confirmations on ID to feel confident. So here are a few of those tips, with the first two focusing on using the site. So number one, you yourself need to be the master of the site if you're going to be training others. So take some time to learn the site, to help others, its navigation process, so this is very smooth and you can help answer questions more effectively. Number two, don't use the site only during the day of the training, but bring in many exposures to the tool before and after a training and during, which creates repetition and foundation building and a scaffolding approach. And the remaining tips are offered to assist with the efficacy of a training, and some of these you may already do, such as number three, offering many, many ways to learn and see. That visual variety from keys to flashcards, preserved to live specimens, and now a technological piece. Number four, build a good proportion of a training around confirmation of IDs, giving a lot of time for this. So practice, 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 and confirm, confirm, confirm IDs. Number five, if you feel comfortable, offer additional learning experiences with the Taxa to keep a volunteer engaged and excited to participate. So maybe co-host a family level workshop just on Caddisflies or just on Mayflies. And I'll give you an example of one of these later in the presentation. Number six, one of the biggest bottlenecks to learning a new group of taxa is the scientific lexicon. Have them learn that scientific lexicon, but also know that it's okay to say crunchy body instead of sclerotized body. And last but not least, which feeds off of number seven here, one way to learn the lexicon, which is important for ID, is the morphological characters. And a good way to start is to engage in the dichotomous key. So the key is on the website. This one goes to order level for insects and also includes some non-insects that you'll see on the right. There are two versions of this, one you can use while connected to the internet and it's interactive, and one that you can print from the resources page as a PDF and laminate it if you would like. The online version is similar to many dichotomous or flat keys as a decision tree approach, but it addresses one big bottleneck that we found in our research, which is locating a morphological characteristic. We've addressed that hurdle by having a pop-up if you click the blue triangle with the plus sign. So here we show that the wing, what wings are and wing pads. And one of the training tips I mentioned was to engage your workshop attendees prior to the workshop. And this can be one way in which to do that. So show them this key. Email your attendee list an image from the website's gallery, have them practice with this key to come up with a final ID and start getting them comfortable with morphology and lexicon ahead of time. Next are these full order sheets, one of the tools that we have made available. And these are for the EPT, so the Ephemeroptera, Mayflies, the Trichoptera, stoneflies, and Trichoptera, Caddisflies. And these are meant for printing, so another good resource if you are offline for your training and want to dive deeper into a particular order for a training. Now in this case, I'm showing the Trichoptera or Caddisfly version, which is 2 pages and is a great way to get an overview of the order all in one place. And here we see a life history summary plus all the case makers, which are just so beautiful in themselves to view. And then on the other side, we see the free living and net spinning caddis plus a morphological diagram, an image of an adult, and an order overview. The team has also pulled together all the taxa for an incredibly cool poster, which you can print and laminate to have at a training, as again, one way to see real images of the possible community you may encounter while monitoring the stream. These are also great up in a classroom, and we've had professors put these up in their entomology labs and really useful for public events. And as shown in the intro video, these beautiful illustrations that you can use, and a gallery of images that are available to be used for non-commercial purposes. So feel free to make your own flashcards or printable materials out of these. One of the trainer tips was to engage your attendees prior to a workshop, and the resources you see here on the screen are a great way to do so. So in an email, direct them to review the quick start guide and watch the intro video. And that way they'll be one step ahead of the game when they arrive to your workshop. And as you saw on the video, there is also a nice way to build confidence through the online practice quiz or game. And again, This can be a way to engage an attendee after a workshop and keep practicing ID. This is made for like the volunteer level, so it goes through phylum and some orders down to some families. And if we're able to secure funding, we would be interested in making these practice quizzes by order level focus as well. Okay, so the last resource I'd like to highlight is our largest trainer slide deck, which is absolutely customizable for your particular selection of taxa and can be used in workshops or in university courses or in student classes. And slides cover the major taxa groups, tips for ID and learning, as well as how to take care of live macros. So example slides such as this one go over tips for diving into ID, such as paying attention to size ranges, starting slowly one order at a time, and being aware of instars and life cycle phases. There are additional slides that go into some of these in a bit more depth. We also have a slide on sensitivity groups, and the subsequent taxa slides are organized as such, but again, you can rearrange this view according to the biotic index that you use in sensitivity in the sensitivity groupings in your region. So this is a great slide to send ahead of time as a PDF or actually have printed at workshops for each attendee for reference. And this slide covers a topic that is near and dear to my trainer heart, those taxa that are commonly misidentified and confused. So I'm sure many of you during trainings often see these mistakes if you're a trainer yourself. For example, the mayflies and stoneflies get confused, but there are several other groups, and this is simply not exhaustive either. So please email us if you have any other groups that you might want to add that might be useful to this slide. Our intentions are here again to open up that bottleneck where a learner might get stuck. There are also slides that review more in depth the why are they different questions that feed off of that prior slide. And here is what one of those taxa specific slides that presents the common scientific name at the top, sensitivity and taxa similarity at the bottom, images and our drawings on the right, and ID life history information on the left. We've also included the gallery of images from the website, and we pulled some of those views out and put them in this slide deck. And so they show a particular morphological character in different views, so you can point them out better during a workshop. And these are so fantastic to have all in one spot. And we are in this final part of the grant and have a few more ideas for resources to produce, including a mobile app that can be used offline, additional tutorial videos, family level ID support, and teacher-student activities and lessons. So at the end of this presentation, there's also a link that you can follow to submit any additional ideas or feedback that you may have for us. So I'd like to share with you in the remaining presentation time 3 workshop examples ranging from 40 minutes to a full day workshop, from novices to those that have some ID skills, as well as some examples of how to use the site for student learning. So this particular workshop example number 1 was a very short introduction to the website and overall kind of view to macroinvertebrates as part of the Pennsylvania Master Naturalist Conference. Many attendees had not heard of aquatic macroinvertebrates, so this was a lot of fun. I showed the introduction video, and with provided laptops and hand lenses, I also had them ID an unknown preserved specimen using the online key. I created a worksheet for them to use that you'll see here on the screen, and had it as a think, pair, share experience. So they were to try their hand at identifying the specimen that I gave them, check the answer key, see if they got it right, and then either draw or write down the key characters that got them to this final ID. And then they were to add a fun fact or 2 that they found on the website. So they shared this with a neighbor and then the entire group of about 20 attendees. So this is something simple you can do as a basic macroinvertebrate introduction with adults or even middle school age students on up. So example number 2, a volunteer level workshop. This one was for Trout Unlimited, and we trained volunteers in their Coldwater Conservation Corp kick seine method, and then trained to an ID to order and some family levels. And this was an all-day training, and we plugged into the website, but also used materials from the resources page with offline activities. We prepped attendees ahead of time, sending them links to the site, like introduction video and ID key to help build their foundation prior to coming to the workshop. And then I used the new slide deck, and for about 40 minutes before we went into the field and saw live specimens, I built in some time for using the site to practice identifying preserved specimens. And we had them bring their own laptop or smart pad to do this. And once we came back into the lab for live ID, there was really no room on the table for laptops or smart pads. Well, maybe smart pads, but we did have a few of the keys printed out for them to use. So they could use the site the whole day if they really wanted to. But in the end, we sent a follow-up email with the quiz and encouraged attendees to keep at it. So it was really nice to bring in the site actually prior to the workshop, during the entire day, and the follow-up. So example number 3, diving deeper into one family, which was the Trichoptera. The workshop was held at the Stroud Water Research Center with myself and a colleague from the entomology department, and we created a lot of materials for this day, including a small manual with a key to the families to give to attendees. And this ended up being just a half-day, 4-hour workshop, which really should have been all day, but we focused just on a subset of Caddisfly families, not all of them, and had live and preserved specimens available pre-collected, as well as scopes for individuals to use. And the Carnegie Mellon University Design and Learning Research team and our external evaluator for this grant also conducted their research to see how attendees were using this site during the workshop and to gain feedback on the design. Again, we brought in many materials to assist in the learning, including these order level sheets that I've already mentioned. Those were really, really nice, and we laminated them and gave them out as a giveaway. And we had, oops, let me go back. Here are some ID worksheets at the bottom of the screen on certain Caddisfly families, so that a learner could just record in their own voice, in their own way, features on ID or notes that they have. So this was in their own language. They could draw arrows, circle things on each specimen, and in their own way, kind of trigger how they would remember and identify. So that was really a nice opportunity for them to have that. And we also created family level worksheets to help the morphological characters and have them to take this away also from the workshop, so something they could reference afterwards. So these are helpful to help you zone in on particular traits of that order or family. So they started off with the order and what were the 3 characters that helped them know that this was a caddisfly, and then they went into the family level of Hydropsychidae and put in the characters of what makes that Hydropsychid. So it was really great. These are just a few examples of how to bring in the website and resources into the training and how we made our own materials for the workshop. And lastly, a few more activities you can do with students, whether your classroom is indoors or outside. So with younger students, diving into the site doing a scavenger hunt kind of activity gets them learning about macroinvertebrates in a fun way. And we've created something like that. And also when we're teaching 4th graders at the Stroud Center, at least, we created a lesson on adaptations that I'll go over here in just a minute. At older grade bands, you can absolutely bring in, teaching ID skills with the key and practice quizzes. And I'll also cover a special story of how high school students locally to us design 3D models of macroinvertebrates using this site. So again, with 4th graders, we have supported teachers in teaching lessons on adaptations. And this is usually a 50-minute experience that we engage the students in. And this is in our education lab here. And we have a series of activities which include a field notebook experience that the students also complete along with this, with everything that you see here. And they get a chance to see live macroinvertebrates we've pre-collected, so they can look at how the macroinvertebrates move in the water, what they look like. And we dress students up as macroinvertebrates too. And it's just a lot of fun. And then additionally, one of the activities that we use are these 11 by 17 printouts of a handful of different macroinvertebrates that we would find in our stream that the students are going to see in that pre-collection that we've given them to view. And students will then be into teams, we'll get them into teams and have one of these printouts per team, and they will study this and then present in front of their peers. And these printouts, let me show you another view of them. So this one in particular is, of course, the caddisfly, focusing on it builds its own house. And so they show various images on one side, and on the other side, on the back, are life history and adaptation nuggets. So we put students again in teams to learn about a particular macroinvertebrate, and then they kind of read over this, take out what they can, and then they present this information to their classmates. We also, during this time frame on adaptations, have students complete this particular diagram that we've created from a picture from macroinvertebrates.org, and they go deeper into adaptations, and here specifically with the Mayfly, we discuss what the tails are for, the gills, the legs, the wing pads, etc. So they fill this out as part of their field notebook. And the image galleries of body characters are also so fun to bring into this experience and available for you as well. So lastly, a few extensions that we'd like to share, one of which is the creation of 3D models of some of the taxa. In this project, we worked with a local high school and their engineering program, as well as the 2D art students and teachers, to create and paint the designs to 3D print damselflies, mayflies, stoneflies, water pennies, crayfish, snails, planaria, hellgrammites, and caddisflies. And students referenced macroinvertebrates.org for creating and painting the models, and our education department uses these now in our student programs and public trainings. They're so great. And good news for you is the 9 files are posted on what's called Thingiverse. You can see that on this website in the upper left, Thingy with an I, and it's for you to access if you ever wanted to print on your own. The files are right there, free and available, open source. Lastly, since we're speaking to an audience of you that most likely would be interested in this topic, we'd like to share with you that the Society for Freshwater Science, an international scientific organization who promotes the further understanding of freshwater ecosystems, has a taxonomic certification program coordinated by one of our entomologists here at the Stroud Center, Mike Brumal, and he's been on the team for the design of this website, macroinvertebrates.org. There are several levels of certifications you can test for an aquatic macroinvertebrate ID through the SFS TCP program, including a mid-level test, one for the EPT, family level, and now there's a new volunteer level certification, which includes, again, some families up to phylums. So all the TCP certification exams are online with images and have a small fee and are for a certification for a certain time range. And we're trying to launch some pilot tests for this new volunteer exam with groups around the country. So if you're interested, please contact Mike. There's his email, and you can also find more about this test on the Society for Freshwater Science TCP website, and you can study for the exams using macroinvertebrates.org. And macroinvertebrates.org is now a part of what is called the Wiki Watershed Toolkit. This is hosted by the Stroud Water Research Center. And this is a website, a web toolkit designed to help citizens, conservation practitioners, municipal decision makers, researchers, educators, and students advance knowledge and stewardship of fresh water. So please visit this site to explore the other tools there. So that's where I will end. There's so much more to share, but thank you so much for the opportunity. And here is a link where you can go to submit feedback or ideas for the website. Also, our contact information should you have questions. So